More laughter. Becca Strauss, who Darius had been trying to impress for weeks, actually smiled at him. Success. The janitor finished mopping and wheeled his cart toward the cafeteria exit. As he passed Darius's table, he paused just for a second and made eye contact. Those eyes, they weren't angry or hurt or defensive. They were just ... tired. Infinitely tired. Like they'd seen too much and couldn't be bothered to see anymore. Then the moment passed. The janitor continued past, the wheels of his cart squeaking slightly, and disappeared through the double doors. "Man, that guy's depressing," said Trevor Chun, Darius's best friend and fellow lacrosse captain. "He is like a walking reminder of what happens when you do UNT apply yourself in life." Right, Darius took a bite of his sandwich. Like, I get that someone has to clean toilets, but does it have to be the world's saddest person? It's bringing down the whole vibe of the school. What Darius didn't see, what none of him saw, was the janitor stopping in the empty hallway just outside the cafeteria doors. Didn't see his shoulders shake slightly. Didn't see him pull a worn handkerchief from his pocket and wipe his eyes. Didn't see the way he took 3 deep breaths before continuing down the hallway, pushing his cart with hands that shook just a little bit more than usual. That was in October. By November, the janitor was gone. A new guy, a younger man with headphones perpetually glued to his ears, took his place. Darius barely noticed. Was busy. Lacrosse season was in full swing. College applications were due, and Becca Strauss had finally agreed to go out with him. Life was good. The old, sad janitor was just a forgotten memory, a punchline that had lost its novelty. Then came December. The school was buzzing with holiday spirit. Tinsel hung from the ceilings, and the annual holiday assembly was the main topic of conversation. This year, the theme was community heroes, celebrating people who made a difference in their town. The principal, Miss Albright, took the stage. "This year," she began, her voice echoing through the auditorium, "we've lost a beloved member of our community, a man many of you saw every day but perhaps never truly knew. I'm talking about Mr. Henderson." A picture flashed on the giant screen behind her. It was the janitor. But he wasn't wearing his gray uniform. He was in a crisp suit, a broad smile on his face, standing next to a beautiful woman in a wedding dress. The photo was black and white, clearly from a long time ago. Darius felt a strange knot form in his stomach. "Mr. Henderson worked as our custodian for 20 years. Ms. Albright continued. "But before that, he was something else entirely." Another photo appeared. Mr. Henderson, much younger, was in a lab coat, peering into a microscope. Mr. Henderson was Dr. Henderson, a brilliant research scientist with a PhD in molecular biology. He was part of a team that developed a groundbreaking treatment for a rare childhood disease, a disease that, tragically, would later claim his own daughter, Sarah. A photo of a young girl with bright, smiling eyes filled the screen. The entire auditorium was silent. You could hear a pin drop. Darius felt his breath catch in his throat. After losing his daughter, Ms. Albright's voice was thick with emotion. Dr. Henderson and his wife were devastated. He found he could no longer work in the field that held so many painful memories. His wife passed away a few years later, and he needed a way to stay busy. Tufi, he found this school. He said being around the energy of young people reminded him of his daughter's joy. The principal paused, taking a sip of water. He loved this school. He saw all of you as the future he was helping to protect. The money he earned here, he didn't need it. He lived a simple life. Every single paycheck he ever earned from this school, for 20 years, was donated to the research foundation he helped establish, a foundation that has saved the lives of hundreds of children. Another image came up. A group of kids, all different ages, smiling and playing at a summer camp for survivors of the disease. Underneath them, a caption read, "Camp Henderson, funded by the generosity of Dr. Arthur Henderson. Mr. Henderson passed away last month from a sudden heart attack." Ms. Albright concluded, "His legacy isn't just in the hallways he kept clean, but in the countless lives he touched and saved." It was a hero hiding in plain sight. The auditorium erupted in a standing ovation. Teachers were openly weeping. Students were wiping their eyes, but Darius couldn't move. He just stared at the picture of the smiling man on the screen. The depressing man, the walking reminder of what happens when you don't apply yourself. The words echoed in his head, each one a physical blow. He remembered the tired eyes, the slight nod. It wasn't defeat he had seen in them. It was grief. It was a lifetime of love and loss carried in a single gaze. He thought of the man's shaking hands, the handkerchief in the hallway, the knot in his stomach twisted into a sharp, searing pain of regret. Becca, sitting next to him, put a hand on his arm. "Are you okay?" she whispered. He couldn't answer. He just shook his head. The image of Mr. Henderson's tired eyes burned into his memory. That afternoon, Darius skipped lacrosse practice. He went to the principal's office. Miss Albright looked surprised to see him. "Darius, what can I do for you?" He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "The foundation. ... Mr. Henderson's foundation. Can you give me the information for it?" Later that week, Darius organized a school-wide fundraiser. He stood up in front of the entire student body, his voice shaking but clear, and told them about the man who cleaned their toilets and saved children's lives. He didn't mention his own cruel words. The shame was his to carry, but he channeled that shame into action. The fundraiser was a massive success. They raised more money than any school event ever had. Darius personally delivered the check to the foundation. At their office, he saw a large portrait of Dr. Arthur Henderson. This time, when Darius looked into his eyes, he didn't see sadness. He saw strength. He saw a purpose. He saw a hero. From that day on, Darius was different. He still played lacrosse, still dated Becca, but there was a new depth to him. He started a community heroes club at school, dedicated to recognizing and helping the unsung heroes in their town. He made a point to learn the name of the new janitor, to ask him how his day was going, and to genuinely listen to the answer. He learned that every person has a story, a deep and complex history that you can't see from the surface. He learned that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can have a price you can't even begin to imagine. He never forgot Mr. Henderson. The man's tired eyes became a permanent reminder for Dear, a reminder that you never truly know the battles someone is fighting, and that sometimes the quietest, most overlooked people are the ones who make the biggest difference in the world. He learned that true success isn't about impressing others or being popular. It is about seeing the humanity in everyone and leaving the world a little better than you found it. And in doing so, he finally became the kind of man Mr. Henderson would have been proud of. Thank you for watching. Remember to look for the heroes all around you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that make you think. Goodadar Darius thought. At least he's feeling something. At least I'm getting through to him. February, the trophy case hallway. Darius found the janitor replacing a burnt-out bulb. No students around. Perfect. Mr. Nobody. My man. Tell me something. Have you ever had dreams? Like aspirations? Or were you born to push a mop cart? The janitor climbed down from his ladder, slow and careful. He looked at Darius for a long moment. Something flickered in those tired eyes. Anger? Sadness? Or just exhausted resignation? Everyone has dreams, young man, he said quietly. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. Everyone yet? What were yours? Let me guess you wanted to be a janitor. It was your lifelong ambition to clean up after teenagers. The old man gathered his tools. I should get back to work. That's not an answer. Come on, Mr. Nobody. Humor me. What did you want to be when you grew up? Before you became this? The janitor looked at Darius again, and this time there was definitely something in his expression. Not anger. Something worse. Pity. I hope you figure it out, Sunne sighed softly. Before it's too late. Then he walked away, leaving Darius standing alone in the hallway with a weird feeling in his chest. Not guilt, he didn't do guilt, but something uncomfortable, something he didn't like. He pushed it away and went to find Trevor. They had lacrosse practice, and making fun of the janitor was getting boring anyway. He needed new material. March brought college acceptance letters. Darius got into 7 schools, his top choice being Princeton. His father was thrilled. His mother was proud. Darius felt vindicated. See, he was going places. He was somebody, unlike certain sad old men who cleaned toilets for a living. In April, as graduation approached, the senior class started getting sentimental. People wrote in yearbooks about memories and friendships and never forgetting where we came from. There was talk of senior pranks and farewell parties. Darius's friend group decided to do something special. Thank you. Campaign for all the unsung heroes of Westbrook Academy, the cafeteria workers, the administrative staff, the security guards, the maintenance crew. Should we include the janitor? Someone asked. Mr. Nobody. Darius laughed. What would we even say? Thanks for being a cautionary tale about what happens when you don't go to college. Darius. Come on, Becca said, his girlfriend of 2 months. She occasionally tried to civilize him. Niece. He's just an old man doing his job. An old man doing his job badly, Darius corrected, but fine. Whatever. Include him if it makes you feel better. The campaign was organized. Students were assigned to deliver thank you cards and small gifts. Darius managed to avoid being assigned to the janitor, which was fine by him. He'd done enough interacting with Mr. Nobody to last a lifetime. Graduation was scheduled for Saturday, June 10th. It would be held in the athletic facility, the one Darius's father had paid for. The Kingsley name displayed proudly above the entrance. The Thursday before graduation, Darius was called to the principal's office. Principal Harrington, a thin woman who'd been at Westbrook for 20 years, looked at him with an unreadable expression. Mr. Kingsley, please sit down. Darius sat. If this is about the lacrosse team spray painting the field, that was Trevor's idea. This isn't about lacrosse. This is about your graduation speech. My graduation speech. By November, mocking the janitor had become Darius's signature bit. He had a whole routine worked out, a series of observations that he'd perform for his audience of classmates. He'd riff on the janitor's age, saying things like, I'm pretty sure he was here when the school was built back in 1952. He'd question his competence, with jokes like, I saw him take 20 minutes to change a light bulb the other day. The bulb won the fight. And he'd attack his very existence, sighing dramatically and saying, if sadness was a person, it would be Mr. Nobody pushing a mop cart. The teachers never said a word. Maybe they didn't hear him, or maybe they just didn't care. Or, more likely, they'd learned that disciplining Darius Kingsley was far more trouble than it was worth. His father, Sterling Kingsley, was a powerful man who sat on the school's board of directors. They had single-handedly donated the new athletic facility, paid for the entire library renovation, and funded scholarships for 15 students. The Kingsley name was literally engraved on plaques all over Westbrook Academy, and that meant Darius could get away with pretty much anything. Through it all, the janitor simply continued his invisible work, mopping floors, emptying trash bins, fixing broken lockers, cleaning bathrooms. He never complained. He never responded to Darius's taunts. He never even acknowledged that he heard them, which, of course, only made Darius try harder. I'm convinced he's a robot, Darius announced one day in December during lunch, his voice loud enough for everyone at his table to hear. Programmed for exactly one task, disappointing everyone around him. His creator was clearly not very good at robotics. Becca, the girl he'd been trying to impress for months, actually laughed at that one. She'd recently started sitting with Darius at lunch, a clear sign his campaign to win her attention was working. Apparently, the janitor mockery was part of his charm. Girls liked guys who were funny, and making fun of the sad old man with the mop was, in his mind, objectively hilarious. Or at least, that's what Darius told himself. But then, in January, something shifted. The janitor started avoiding the cafeteria during lunch hour. He'd clean it early in the morning, before anyone arrived, or late in the afternoon, after everyone had left. But never when students were around. He did the same with the main hallways during passing periods. He became even more of a ghost, timing his work to avoid the crowds, slipping through the school like a shadow. "Oh, look, Mr. Nobody is scared of us now," Darius said with a smirk when he finally noticed the change. I guess he finally realized he just can't handle this level of comedy genius. But there was something unsatisfying about mocking someone who wasn't there to hear it. The jokes lost their edge. The performance felt hollow without the janitor's tired eyes, his trembling hands, his visible, if deeply suppressed pain. So, Darius started seeking him out. He made it a new game. He'd find him in empty classrooms after school or track him down in dusty utility closets. He'd corner him, ready with fresh material. "Hey, Mr. Nobody. How's the exciting world of trash removal today? Discover any new species of bacteria in the boys' bathroom. You found the meaning of life at the bottom of a toilet bowl yet?" The janitor would just nod politely, his face a mask of weary resignation, and continue working. But Darius started noticing other things, small details he hadn't seen before. A clean, folded handkerchief that appeared more and more frequently, used to quietly dab at his eyes when he thought no one was looking. He noticed the way the old man's hand shook, harder than before, as he gripped his mop handle, and he saw the slump in his shoulders, a curve that seemed to deepen with each and every encounter. The more Darius pushed, the more the old man seemed to shrink, fading a little more each day. But Darius, caught up in his own performance, just saw it as a sign that his jokes were landing harder than ever. He was winning. One afternoon, Darius found him in the old science wing, replacing a flickering fluorescent light. He was standing precariously on a wobbly step stool, his hands shaking as he tried to fit the long tube into the fixture. "Careful there, Mr. Nobody," Darius called out, his voice echoing in the empty hall. "Wouldn't want you to fall and break a hip. The school might have to replace you with a Roomba. It would probably be more efficient." The janitor flinched, his hand slipped, and the glass tube dropped, shattering on the tile floor with a loud pop. He stumbled off the stool, his face pale. He looked at the mess of broken glass, then at Darius. For the first time, he didn't just nod. Spoke. His voice was quiet. A merry whisper cracked with an emotion Darius couldn't quite place. "Please," he said, "just please leave me alone." Seeing that raw flicker of pain, that genuine plea, should have been a victory. It was the reaction he'd been working towards for months. But instead of feeling triumphant, Darius felt a strange, uncomfortable knot tighten in his stomach. The man looked so defeated, so utterly broken, standing there amidst the shattered glass. It wasn't funny anymore. It was just sad. Boom. Cool. The next day, Becca was waiting for him at his locker. "Hey," she said, but her usual bright smile was missing. "Can I talk to you for a sec?" They walked to a quiet corner of the library, the Kingsley Library. A plaque by the door reminded him. "I heard what happened yesterday," she began, her voice low, "with Mr. Henderson." "Mr. Henderson?" Darius asked, confused. "Who's that?" "The janitor," she said, giving him a look. "His name is Arthur Henderson. My mom is on the parent-teacher committee, and she knows him. She told me his wife passed away a few months ago, in October. They'd been married for over 50 years. The words hung in the air. October. That was right around when Darius's routine had started. The taunts about him being sad, the jokes about his slow, fumbling movements. Darius felt the blood drain from his face. The handkerchief, the shaking hands, the deep, unconquerable sadness in his eyes. It wasn't about him. It was never about him. The old man wasn't Mr. Nobody. He was Mr. Henderson, a man grieving the loss of his entire world, coming to work every day to be relentlessly tormented by a privileged kid for sport. That afternoon, Darius didn't look for Mr. Henderson. He didn't have to. He saw him in the hallway, carefully sweeping up some spilled popcorn near the gym. His movements were slow, deliberate. Darius walked up to him, his heart pounding in his chest. The janitor tensed, his shoulders hunching, bracing for the next verbal assault. But it never came. Instead, Darius stood there for a moment, silent. Tene spoke, his voice barely audible. "Mr. Henderson, The old man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise at hearing his own name. I'm sorry, Darius said, the words feeling foreign and clumsy on his tongue. I'm so sorry. For everything. Mr. Henderson just stared at him, his expression unreadable. He didn't say, "It's okay." He didn't say anything. He just gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then turned back to his sweeping. Darius stood there for a long moment, feeling smaller and more invisible than the man he had spent months trying to erase. He turned and walked away, the sound of the broom whispering against the floor behind him, a quiet rhythm of dignity and resilience. It was the loudest sound he had ever heard. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking and subscribing for more content that makes you think. You're giving one. As class president, you're required to give a speech representing your fellow seniors. Darius had completely forgotten he was class president. It was a strange situation. He'd run unopposed. No, that wasn't quite right. He'd won by default because literally no one else wanted the job. It was a strategic move, really. It looked impressive on college applications, but required almost no actual work. Perfect. Okay, he said slowly, feeling the conversation shift into something serious. What about it? Principal Harrington leaned forward slightly in her chair, her gaze unwavering. I wanted to remind you that graduation is a formal ceremony. It's attended by families, alumni, and prominent community members. Your speech needs to reflect the values of Westbrook Academy and honor the journey you and your classmates have taken together. Sure. Values. Journey. Got it. Darius mentally ticked off the keywords. He could work with that. Isa. The principal studied him for a moment longer, as if trying to read something behind his casual agreement. I also wanted to tell you something about Mr. Calloway. The janitor. That uncomfortable, squirming feeling returned to Darius's gut. What about him? He asked, his voice a little tighter than he intended. He's retiring. Graduation day will be his last day at Westbrook. He's been here for 48 years. We're recognizing him during the ceremony. Okay. Darius drew the word out, unsure where this was heading, but with a growing sense of dread. I'm telling you this, Principal Harrington said, her voice dropping to a more serious tone, because I've heard from multiple sources that you've been unkind to Mr. Calloway this year, that you've mocked him repeatedly, made him the subject of cruel jokes. Darius's face flushed hot with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. I was just kidding around. It wasn't serious. It was just locker room banter. Stuff guys say, wasn't it? Principal Harrington leaned even further forward, her eyes locking onto his. Darius, you're a smart young man. You're going to Princeton in the fall. You have your whole life ahead of you, a future brighter than most. But intelligence without kindness is just cruelty with a better vocabulary. I sincerely hope that you use graduation as an opportunity to reflect on the kind of person you want to be. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Is this about the speech? Are you telling me what to say? Darius shot back, feeling cornered. I'm telling you to think before you speak, to consider that your words have power, and that sometimes the people we dismiss as nobody are the very people who hold everything together. She dismissed him with a nod, and Darius left her office feeling a confusing storm of emotions. He was annoyed, but also vaguely ashamed. Who was Principal Harrington to lecture him about kindness? She barely knew him, and it wasn't like the janitor had ever complained. He'd never said a single word, never fought back. So what was the big deal? It was just a joke. Graduation day arrived, warm and bright, bathing the campus in a golden glow. The massive athletic facility had been transformed, decorated with Westbrook's blue and gold colors. Endless rows of folding chairs filled the floor, and families arrived early, buzzing with excitement, claiming the best seats, setting up cameras, and clutching bouquets of flowers and gift bags. Backstage, shrouded in the chaos of last-minute preparations, Darius stood in his cap and gown. He reviewed the speech he'd scribbled down at midnight the night before. It was Fine. Not great, but fine. Generic stuff about friendship, shared memories, and bright futures. It was exactly the kind of thing people expected to hear at graduations. It was safe. You nervous? His friend Trevor appeared beside him, a mirror image in his own cap and gown. About what? It's just a speech. You know your dad's out there, right? Front row, with your mom and like half the board of directors. Darius had known his father would be there, but the reminder still made his stomach tighten into a knot. Sterling Kingsley had high expectations. Always odd. Darius's Princeton acceptance had, for the most part, satisfied those expectations, but a mediocre graduation speech that could still disappoint. His father didn't tolerate mediocrity. I'll be fine, Darius said, trying to convince himself as much as Trevor. It's not like they're expecting Shakespeare. The ceremony began. De familia stately chords of pomp and circumstance filled the air, the music swelling as hundreds of seniors filed into their seats in a sea of blue gowns. Families applauded, their pride palpable. Cameras flashed from every corner of the room. Principal Harrington took the podium and welcomed everyone. Then came the standard graduation elements. The salutatorian speech, which was predictably boring, the valedictorian speech, which was slightly less boring, and a seemingly endless parade of awards and recognitions. Darius zoned out, his mind drifting. He mentally rehearsed his own speech, trying to find a rhythm, a way to make it sound natural instead of like he'd written it at midnight while half asleep. Then, Principal Harrington said something that cut through his haze and made him sit up straight. Before we hear from our class president, I'd like to take a moment to recognize a very special member of our Westbrook family. Mr. Ezra Calloway has been our head custodian for 48 years. He's been here longer than most of our current students have been alive. Today is his last day before retirement, and we wanted to honor his decades of dedicated service. A ripple of applause went through the audience spotlight. Respectful, but not particularly enthusiastic. Most people probably didn't even know who the janitor was. To them, he was just part of the background. Mr. Calloway, would you please join me on stage? The old man appeared from the wings, moping slowly. He was wearing a suit that seemed too big for his thin frame, as if it belonged to another man from another time. He climbed the stairs carefully, each step deliberate, and accepted Principal Harrington's handshake, with a hand that trembled visibly. I know Mr. Calloway is a humble man who doesn't seek recognition, Principal Harrington continued, her voice warm, but I wanted to share just a few things about him that most people don't know. Darius felt a prickle of unease. Where was this going? This felt personal. Mr. Calloway began working at Westbrook Academy in 1975, right after completing his service in Vietnam. He started as a night janitor and worked his way up to head custodian, a position he's held for the past 30 years. During his tenure, he's maintained every building on this campus, often working late into the night to ensure that students and faculty had clean, safe spaces for learning. The principal paused, letting the weight of those 48 years settle over the crowd. What you might not know, she went on, is that Mr. Calloway is also an artist, a self-taught painter. For nearly 5 decades, after his shifts, he would retreat to a small, forgotten storage closet in the basement of the arts building. There, surrounded by old canvases and forgotten supplies, he painted. He painted landscapes of his childhood home. He painted portraits of the people he met. He painted his memories of Vietnam, not of the war, but of the country's staggering beauty. A quiet murmur spread through the audience. Darius's heart began to pound. The janitor, a painter. He never showed his work to anyone. He did it for himself. It was his way of processing the world, of finding beauty in the quiet hours of the night. Last year, our new art teacher, Ms. Albright, discovered his studio by accident. She was so moved by his work that, with his very reluctant permission, she submitted a few pieces to the state arts competition. Principal Harrington smiled. This year, Mr. Ezra Calloway won the Governor's Award for Excellence in the Arts. The room erupted, not in polite applause this time, but in a genuine, thunderous ovation. People were on their feet. Students, parents, teachers, all of them. cheering for the quiet man on stage who was now wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Darius was stunned, his own hands clapping without a conscious thought. He felt a wave of something he couldn't name. Shame. A profound sense of having missed something incredibly important. He was a decorated veteran, an award-winning artist, and Darius had called him Old Man Mumbles and mocked the way he walked. The generic speech in his pocket suddenly felt like a lie, a hollow piece of paper. The principal's words echoed in his mind. Asterisk intelligence. Without kindness is just cruelty with a better vocabulary. Asterisk Principal Harrington gestured for the crowd to settle. And now, I'd like to welcome our class president, Darius Kingsley, to podium. Darius walked to the stage on autopilot, his legs feeling like lead. He shook the principal's hand. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces, his father's among them, stern and watchful. He took a deep breath, reached into his pocket, and pulled out his neatly folded speech. And then he let it go. The paper fluttered to the floor. He leaned into the microphone. Hello, everyone. I had a speech prepared. It was about our shared journey, our bright futures, the usual stuff. But I'm not going to give that speech. Instead, I want to talk about Mr. Calloway. I want to talk about what it means to truly see the people around us. Because for the past year, I and some of my friends, we were unkind to Mr. Calloway. We made jokes. We dismissed him. We saw a janitor, and we looked no further. We never saw the veteran. We never saw the artist. We never saw the man who held this place together with quiet dignity for 48 years. We saw what we wanted to see, and we were cruel because of it. He looked over at Mr. Calloway, who was watching him with wide, tear-filled eyes. I am deeply, deeply sorry, Mr. Calloway, for my arrogance and for my ignorance. Darius turned back to his classmates. Our education here at Westbrook wasn't just about books and exams. It was about learning how to be good people. And I think, maybe, that's a lesson some of us, including myself, are only just beginning to understand. The real test isn't getting into a good college. The real test is what we do with our lives. How we treat the people we share this world with. Do we look for the value in everyone? Or do we only see what's on the surface? Principal Harrington taught me something recently. She said intelligence without kindness is just cruelty with a better vocabulary. Today, I understand what she meant. So, to the class of today, my hope for us is not just that we are successful, but that we are kind. That we learn to see the artists, the heroes, the people holding everything together, who are hidden in plain sight all around us. Thank you. He stepped back from the podium into a stunned silence, followed by the most powerful applause of the day. As he walked off the stage, Mr. Calloway met him at the bottom of the stairs. The old man pulled him into a hug, his thin arms surprisingly strong, and in that moment, Darius felt the true weight of his graduation. It wasn't an ending. It was a beginning, a chance to be better. The applause swelled, and there was Mr. Calloway, the janitor, standing awkwardly on the graduation stage, clearly uncomfortable with all the attention. But what many people don't know, Principal Harrington said, and her voice suddenly changed, is that before Mr. Calloway worked in custodial services, he had a different career, a different life. A hush fell over the auditorium. Something important was coming. In the late 1960s, she began. Mr. Calloway attended Harvard University on a full academic scholarship. He graduated summa cum laude with a degree in English literature and was accepted into Harvard's graduate program in education. He was on track to become a professor to teach literature at the university level. Whispers rippled through the crowd of students and parents. Harvard. But then he was drafted. The principal continued, sent to Vietnam in 1970. He served as an infantry soldier for 2 tours, experiencing things that most of us cannot imagine. He was wounded twice, received multiple commendations for valor, and returned home in 1973 with physical and psychological scars that would affect him for the rest of his life. The floor felt like it was tilting beneath me. Hagvagia, Professor, this couldn't be right. Mr. Calloway was just ... Mr. Nobley, the sad old janitor. He wasn't supposed to have been somebody. When Mr. Calloway came home from Vietnam, Principal Harrington said, her voice now quiet, he found that the world had changed. The graduate program he'd been accepted into had filled his spot. The professor who'd mentored him had retired, and the country he'd served was deeply divided about the war. He struggled with what we now call PTSD. He struggled to find work in academia, where his military service was seen by some as a liability rather than an asset. He struggled with nightmares, with hypervigilance, with the invisible wounds that so many veterans carry. The auditorium was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. So he took a job as a janitor, she explained, because it was available, because it paid enough to support himself, because it didn't require extensive interviews or explanations or confronting his trauma daily. And over time, that temporary job became permanent. The man who could have been Dr. Ezra Calloway, professor of literature, became Mr. Calloway, head custodian. Principal Harrington turned to the old man, who was just looking down at the floor, his shoulders hunched. But here's what I want everyone to understand. Mr. Calloway never stopped being brilliant. He never stopped being educated. He never stopped reading, thinking, learning. He simply redirected his gifts. Instead of teaching literature to college students, he quietly mentored the students right here at Westbrook. He left books in study halls for students who seemed interested. He recommended authors to kids who looked like they needed an escape. He helped struggling students with their essays unofficially, but in quiet conversations in empty hallways. He was a teacher who never had a classroom. Tears were flowing openly now, not just from proud parents, but from students. Students who'd walked past Mr. Calloway every single day without really seeing him. I just felt sick. Mr. Calloway once told me, the principal said, that his work here at Westbrook gave him purpose when he'd lost all other purpose, that maintaining the school, keeping it clean and safe and functional felt like maintaining hope. Every floor he mopped, every desk he fixed, every light bulb he changed was a small act of service to the next generation. A generation he'd fought to protect in Vietnam, even when that generation didn't appreciate the sacrifice. She turned back to face all of us. So as we celebrate our graduating seniors today, as we honor their achievements and their bright future, I want us to also honor Mr. Calloway, to recognize that the person we walk past without seeing might be carrying a story we cannot imagine, that the janitor pushing a mop cart might have a Harvard degree, that the quiet man fixing our broken things might be the most educated person in the building. The applause was thunderous. Everyone was on their feet. Mr. Calloway finally looked up, surprised, his eyes glistening with tears. The principal handed him a plaque, and he accepted it with trembling hands. Then he did something none of us expected. He stepped up to the microphone. His voice was soft, a little shaky, but it carried through the auditorium. Thank you. I didn't expect this. I'm not good with words anymore. Used to be, but ... Double quotes. He paused, gathering himself, taking a deep breath. I want to say something to the students, to the seniors graduating today. He looked out at the sea of blue and gold caps. You are all so smart, so capable, so full of potential. You have opportunities I never dreamed of. You're going to do amazing things. But I want you to remember something. Success isn't just about where you go to college, or what job you get, or how much money you make. It's about who you are when no one important is watching. It's about how you treat people who can't do anything for you. It's about kindness, even when kindness costs you something. His eyes scanned the crowd of students and found mine. He held my gaze for just a second, but it felt like an eternity. Because the world will break you down sometimes. The old man continued, his voice stronger now. Life will take your plans and crush them. War, or tragedy, or illness, or just bad luck, it'll knock you off the path you thought you'd walk. And when that happens, the person you've been all along is who you'll become. If you've been kind, you'll still be kind. If you've been cruel, you'll still be cruel. Choose now who you want to be. Choose while you still can. He stepped back from the microphone, and Principal Harrington led him off stage to a roar of continued applause. I watched him go, feeling like I might be sick right there on the risers. Harvard. Professor. Veteran. PTSD. Wounded in combat. All of it was playing on the loop in my head, completely reshaping every single interaction I'd ever had with him. Every cruel joke, every dismissive comment. Asterisk. You missed a spot. Time to re-tear. A trained monkey could do it better. Have you ever had dreams? Asterisk. The memory of my own words made my stomach turn. I felt ashamed, disgusted with myself. And now, Principal Harrington's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. I'd like to invite our class president, Darius Kingsley, to address his fellow graduates. My name. She called my name. I stood up on autopilot, my legs feeling like lead. I walked to the stage, my heart pounding in my ears. I took the podium and looked out at hundreds of faces. My family, the teachers, my classmates. My father was right there in the front row, his expression a mix of pride and expectation, waiting to hear his son deliver the perfect speech. The speech was in my hand. The safe, generic, pre-approved speech about friendship and memories and bright futures. The speech my father helped me write, but as I looked down at the words on the page, they felt hollow. They felt meaningless. After what I had just heard, after what Mr. Calloway had just said, I couldn't read it. I just couldn't. I took a deep breath, just like Mr. Calloway did. I looked from the paper to the crowd. I saw the faces of my friends, the people I'd grown up with, and I saw Mr. Calloway's story reflected in the potential of every single one of us. His words were still ringing in my ears. Asterisk, choose now who you want to be. Asterisk, my own carefully crafted speech felt like a lie. Performance! It was about being the person everyone expected me to be, not the person I actually wanted to become. And in that moment, standing at that podium, I knew I had a choice to make. I could give the safe speech, get the applause, and please my father. Or I could say something real. Something that mattered. I lowered the papers from my hand and let them rest on the podium. I looked out at my classmates, really looked at them, and I started to speak, not from the script, but from the raw, aching place in my chest where Mr. Calloway's story had just landed. Today, I began, my voice unsteady, we heard a story about a man we thought we knew. I had a speech prepared. It was trembling in my hands as I stood at the podium. The words swam before my eyes, meaningless platitudes about the journey we've shared and the memories we LL cherish. Words I'd written without thought, without care, without actually meaning anything. I looked out at the audience and found my father's face in the front row. Sterling Kingsley sat with perfect posture, arms crossed, his expression neutral, waiting, judging, expecting excellence, because anything less was unacceptable. Then my eyes drifted to the wings of the stage, where the Janitor, Mr. Calloway, Mr. Ezra Calloway, Harvard graduate and Vietnam veteran, stood holding his retirement plaque. He was still crying softly, looking small in that too-large suit. The man I had tormented for months. The man I'd called Mr. Nobody. The man who'd told me, I hope you figure it out, son, before it's too late. I folded the speech and put it in my pocket. I had a speech prepared, I said into the microphone. My voice sounded strange, younger, shakier than usual. It was about friendship and memories and all the standard graduation stuff you expect to hear. It was fine. Safe. Completely meaningless. A ripple of uncertain laughter went through the audience. Principal Harrington's expression shifted to concern. But I can't read it, I continued, because after what we just heard about Mr. Calloway, reading my prepared speech would be the most cowardly thing I could do. And I've been a coward for a long time. I just didn't know it until today. Complete silence now. My father's arms. He leaned forward slightly. This year, I made fun of the janitor a lot. It became kind of my thing, mocking the sad old man with the mop cart. I called him Mr. Nobody. I made jokes about his age, his job, his general existence. I did it because it made people laugh, because it made me feel clever, because I could, and because no one stopped me. My hands were shaking now, but I kept going. I never asked who he was, never wondered if he had a story, never considered that maybe just me, the person cleaning our toilets, might be more educated than all of us combined. I just saw a janitor. Someone beneath me, someone who didn't matter. I looked toward the wings. toward Mr. Calloway. I was wrong. Completely, profoundly wrong. And I'm sorry. The apology felt inadequate, but it was all I had. Mr. Calloway went to Harvard. He was going to be a professor. He served his country in a war most of us only know from history books. He came home broken and had to rebuild his entire life. And instead of becoming bitter, instead of giving up, he found purpose in taking care of this school, in taking care of us, even when we didn't deserve it. My voice cracked, especially when we didn't deserve it. I paused, gathering myself. The auditorium remained silent. Even the usual coughing and rustling had stopped. Everyone was listening. I'm going to Princeton in the fall, I said. I got in because I'm smart, because I have good grades, because my test scores were high, and because my father donated a lot of money to this school, which opened doors for me that wouldn't have opened otherwise. I've never had to struggle, never had to work a job I didn't want, never had to rebuild my life from scratch after watching it collapse. I looked at my classmates in their matching caps and gowns. Most of us haven't. We're privileged. We attend an elite private school. We have families who can afford tuition. We have futures that are basically guaranteed, as long as we don't screw them up too badly. And that's not bad, I continued quickly. There's nothing wrong with privilege, but there's everything wrong with using that privilege to hurt people who have less. With looking down on someone because they clean for a living. With assuming that a janitor is a failure instead of recognizing that a janitor might be a hero. I took a breath. This next part was harder. I spent this entire year being casually cruel to someone who de-survived things I couldn't imagine. And you know what the worst part is? He never fought back. Never reported me. Never even told me to stop. He just kept doing his job. Kept serving this school. Kept being kind even when kindness was the last thing I deserved. I looked directly at my father now. Sterling Kingsley's expression was unreadable, but he was listening. Actually listening. My dad taught me that success means being at the top, I said. Being the best. Winning. He taught me that weakness is contemptible and that people who end up in service jobs made bad choices and have only themselves to blame. I saw my father stiffen. Good. This needed to be said, but Mr. Calloway didn't make bad choices. He made sacrifices. He served his country and paid for it with his mental health and his career and his dreams. And instead of recognizing that sacrifice, instead of honoring it, I mocked him, because I'd been taught that people like him don't matter. My voice grew stronger. But I was taught wrong. Success isn't about being at the top. It's about how you treat people on the way up. It's about recognizing that everyone has a story, has dignity, has value. The janitor, the cafeteria worker, the security guard there, not background characters in our lives. They're human beings who make our comfortable existence possible. I turned toward the wings again, toward Mr. Calloway. Sir, I know this apology doesn't fix anything. I know saying sorry doesn't undo the months of cruelty, but I need you to know I was wrong about everything. You're not, Mr. Nobody. You're someone who's achieved more, survived more, and contributed more than I probably ever will. And I'm deeply, profoundly sorry for how I treated you. Mr. Calloway was openly crying now. He nodded slightly acknowledgement, if not quite forgiveness. I looked back at my classmates. I'm telling you all this because I don't want you to make my mistakes. We're about to graduate, about to go off to college and careers and adult lives. We're going to have power that comes from education, from family connections, from privilege, and how we use that power matters. We can use it to lift people up, or we can use it to crush people who are already struggling. We can see the humanity in everyone we meet, or we can dismiss people based on their job title, their appearance, their circumstances. I gripped the sides of the podium. I chose wrong this year. I chose cruelty when I could have chosen kindness. I chose mockery when I could have chosen curiosity. I chose to make someone feel small so I could feel big. Don't be like me, I said simply. Be better. Ask questions. Learn people's stories. Recognize that the person serving your coffee or cleaning your dorm room or fixing your car might be a Harvard graduate, Might be a veteran. Might be someone who's surviving circumstances you can't imagine. Treat them accordingly. He paused, searching for the right words to end with. Mr. Calloway said something earlier that's going to stay with me forever. The person you've been all along is who you will become. I've been cruel. I've been arrogant. I've been someone who hurts people for entertainment. But I'm choosing, right now, to become someone different. Someone better. Someone who actually deserves the opportunities I've been given. Darius looked at his father one more time. Sterling Kingsley's expression had shifted, not quite approval, but something. Consideration, maybe. A willingness to listen. So, that's my graduation speech, Darius concluded. Not the one I planned, but the one I needed to give. Congratulations to my fellow seniors. We're about to go out into the world. Let's try not to be a shows while we're out there. Let's try to remember that everyone matters, even especially the people we're tempted to ignore. He stepped back from the podium. For a moment, there was silence. Complete, utter silence. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined. Then it became a wave students, families, faculty, all applauding. Not the polite, obligatory applause of earlier. Something real. Something earned. Darius walked off stage, his legs shaking. Principal Harrington met him in the wings. That was brave, she said quietly. And necessary. Thank you. Mr. Calloway was there too. The old man looked at Darius for a long moment, those tired eyes searching his face. You figured it out? Sighed softly. Better late than never. Then he did something Darius didn't expect. He extended his trembling hand. Darius shook it, and the old man's grip was surprisingly strong. I'm sorry, Darius said again. I'm so sorry. I know some. No. Mr. Calloway smiled a real smile that transformed his weathered face. Now you've got to live it. Words are easy. Actions are what count. I will. I promise. The ceremony continued. Diplomas were distributed. More speeches were made. The graduating class processed out to applause and celebration. But Darius barely registered any of it. His mind was stuck on the old man's words. Actions are what count. After the ceremony, the athletic facility emptied into the courtyard for a reception. Families mingled, took photos, congratulated their graduates. Darius found himself surrounded by people, some congratulating him on his speech, others looking at him with new eyes, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Becca approached, her expression complicated. That I don't even know what to say. That was incredibly honest. I should have been honest months ago, before I hurt someone. Yeah. You should have. She studied him. Are you actually going to change? Or was that just a performance? I don't know, Darius admitted. I want to change, but I don't know if I can. Then figure it out. Because the guy who mocked that janitor all year, I don't want to date him anymore. But the guy who gave that speech, he might be worth knowing. She walked away, leaving Darius alone with that assessment. Fair. More than fair. His father appeared next, Sterling Kingsley in his expensive suit, his power broker bearing. We need to talk. Darius' stomach clenched. Okay. They walked to a quiet corner of the courtyard, away from the crowds. That speech, Sterling began. That was not what I expected. I know. I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. You didn't embarrass me. You surprised me. His father's expression was difficult to read. You said I taught you that people in service jobs made bad choices. Is that really what you think I believe? Isn't it? Sterling was quiet for a long moment. I've built my career on being tough, on demanding excellence, on not accepting mediocrity. And yes, I've probably communicated that success means being at the top. But I've never believed that people in service jobs don't matter. But you've never said they do matter either. No, I haven't. His father looked genuinely troubled. I've taken them for granted. The people who make my life comfortable. And I've apparently taught you to do the same. That's a failure on my part. This conversation was surreal. Sterling Kingsley didn't admit failures. I don't know if I can change, Darius said, echoing what he'd told Becca. I don't know if one speech makes me a better person. It doesn't, his father said bluntly. But it's a start. And Darius, I'm proud of you for making that start, for having the courage to admit you were wrong in front of everyone who matters to you. That takes strength, coming from Sterling Kingsley. That was high praise. There's something else, his father continued. I've been thinking about what you said, about privilege and power and how we use it, and I've decided to establish a scholarship fund for veterans to help them complete their education or retrain for new careers. Men and women like your Mr. Calloway who served their country and came home to find their lives derailed. Darius stared at his father. Really? Really? I'll announce it next. Board meeting. Call it the Ezra Calloway Veteran Scholarship. $100,000 annually. Should help at least 10 veterans complete their degrees. Dad, that's amazing. It's the least I can do. You were right in your speech. I've had power for a long time. Maybe it's time I used it for something beyond profit margins and board seats. They stood together in companionable silence, watching the celebration around them. You're still going to Princeton, Sterling said after a while. But I want you to promise me something. What? Don't waste this opportunity. Not the education, I know. You won't waste that, but the chance to become someone worth being. Someone who uses his advantages to help others, not to hurt them. Can you promise me that? I can try. That's all I ask. The reception slowly wound down. Families began to drift away, carrying their proud graduates off to celebratory dinners and fancy parties. But Darius wasn't leaving. Not yet. He found himself searching the thinning crowd for one particular person. He found Mr. Calloway in the custodial office's small, cramped room just off the main hallway that Darius had never actually entered before. The door was propped open, and the old man was inside, packing his few personal belongings into a plain cardboard box, a coffee mug, a few faded photographs, a well-worn copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. Darius knocked softly on the doorframe. Mr. Calloway, can I talk to you? The old man looked up, his movements unheard. Of course. Come in. The office was tiny and sparse, just a metal desk, a filing cabinet, and a calendar on the wall with dates marked in neat, precise handwriting. This had been Mr. Calloway's space for 48 years. His kingdom, small as it was. I wanted to apologize again, Darius said, his voice quiet. Properly this time, without an audience. You already apologized. In front of everyone? That took courage. It doesn't fix anything, though. Doesn't undo what I did. No, it doesn't, Mr. Calloway said, continuing to pack. But redemption isn't about undoing the past. It's about building a better future. You can't unspeak words. You can't unhurt people. But you can choose to be kinder going forward. That's all any of us can do. Principal Harrington said you've been mentoring students, quietly helping them. I never knew that. Most people didn't. That was intentional. I didn't help students for recognition. I helped them because I saw myself in them young people, trying to figure out who they were, what they wanted, how to navigate a complicated world. Did you ever think about going back to teaching? Officially? I mean, Mr. Calloway smiled, a sad, distant look in his eyes. Every day for the first 20 years. But by the time I got my PTSD under control, by the time I felt stable enough to handle a classroom again, I was too old. No one wants to hire a 50-year-old first-time teacher with a 40-year gap in his academic career. That's not fair. Life rarely is, but I made peace with it. I found purpose in other ways. He picked up the copy of Whitman, holding it gently. This book saved my life. You know, after Vietnam, when I was struggling to find a reason to keep going, I'd read Whitman's words about the human spirit, about resilience, about finding beauty in broken things. And it reminded me that even broken people can still be whole in ways that matter. "What was your favorite line?" Darius asked, leaning against the door frame. "I am large. I contain multitudes." Mr. Calloway ran his fingers over the worn cover. "It meant I could be multiple things at once. A veteran and a janitor, a Harvard graduate and a service worker. Someone broken and someone still capable of love. I didn't have to choose just one identity. I could contain all of them." Darius thought about that for a moment. "I think I've been trying to be just one thing. The successful guy. The popular guy. The one who wins. But maybe that's not enough." "It's not," Mr. Calloway affirmed. "Humans are complicated. We're all containing multitudes, the good and the bad, the kind and the cruel, the brave and the cowardly. The goal is to nurture the best parts and starve the worst parts. You've been feeding your cruelty this year. It's time to feed your compassion instead." "How do I do that?" Mr. Calloway paused his packing and considered the question. "Start small. Notice people, the server at your restaurant, the person who delivers your mail, the student sitting alone in the cafeteria. See them. Acknowledge them. Ask about their day. Small acts of recognition can mean everything to someone who feels invisible. Like you felt invisible. Like I often felt invisible. Yes, though not always. Some students saw me, said hello, asked how I was doing. Those small moments mattered more than they probably ever realized. Was there ever a time when I was decent to you? Before I started being an asshole, Mr. Calloway thought back. Your freshman year. You held the door for me once when I was carrying supplies. You said thank you, sir, when I fixed a jammed locker for you. You were polite, normal, kind, even. What changed? You got popular, got confident, started performing for an audience. The cruelty came later, when you realized it made people laugh. When you discovered that mocking the janitor was easier than developing a real personality. The assessment stung, a sharp jab of truth. Darius had traded genuine character for cheap laughs. I want to be better, he said, the words feeling heavy and real. But I don't know if I can be. What if I get to college and fall into the same patterns? What if I forget everything I learned today? Then you'll fail, and hopefully you'll learn from that failure and try again. Growth isn't a straight line, Darius. You'll have setbacks. You'll hurt people again. Probably not intentionally, but through carelessness or selfishness, or just forgetting to be mindful. The real question is whether you'll notice when you do it, whether you'll care, and whether you'll work to do better next time. Mr. Calloway taped the box shut. I'm not going to tell you that one apology makes everything okay. It doesn't. You hurt me this year. You made me dread coming to work. You made me feel small and worthless after I'd spent years building myself back up from the person I was after Vietnam. That pain doesn't just disappear because you gave a nice speech. I know. I'm so sorry. But, Mr. Calloway continued, his tone shifting slightly, I also believe in second chances, in the possibility of change. You're 18 years old. Your character isn't set in stone yet. You can still choose who you become. And the fact that you're here, in T's office, having this conversation instead of being at some graduation party, that suggests you're serious about choosing better. I am. I want to be someone my mom would be proud of. Someone my dad can respect for reasons beyond money and status. Someone I can respect. Then do the work. Every day, in small ways and large ways. And Darius, don't just be kind to people who can do something for you. Be kind to everyone, especially the people society tells you don't matter. Those are the people who need kindness the most. They stood in silence for a moment, an unlikely Pertha-privileged graduate, and the janitor with the Harvard degree. What will you do now, Darius asked, in retirement? I'm going to read all the books I never had time for while I was working. I'm going to volunteer at the VA helping other veterans navigate their benefits and their trauma. And I'm going to write. Write what? A memoir, maybe. Or poetry. Or just journal entries no one will ever see. I need to process 48 years of experiences. Need to make sense of what my life has been. I'd read your memoir. I think a lot of people would. Maybe. Or maybe it'll just be for me. Either way, I need to write it. Mr. Calloway picked up his box. I should go. My daughter is picking me up. She's taking me to dinner to celebrate my retirement. You have a daughter, 2 daughters, and a son. 5 grandchildren. A whole life outside this school that you never asked about. Another subtle reminder of how completely Darius had failed to see. Mr. Calloway, as a whole person, I hope retirement is good to you, Darius said sincerely. I hope you get to do all the things you've been putting off. Thank you. And Darius, I hope Princeton is good to you. I hope you study hard and make friends and discover who you really are. But more than that, I hope you remember this conversation. This feeling. The discomfort of realizing you've been cruel. Old? Onto that. Let it guide you. I will. Mr. Calloway extended his hand again, and Darius shook it. This time, the handshake felt different. Not like an apology and acceptance, but like equals. Like 2 people who had seen each other's humanity and chosen to honor it. Goodbye, Darius Kingsley. I'll be watching your career with interest. Goodbye, Mr. Calloway. And thank you for everything, even the parts I didn't appreciate at the time. The old man smiled one last time and left, carrying his box of 48 years of memories out the door. Darius stood alone in the empty custodial office, looking at the space where Mr. Calloway had spent nearly 5 decades. A small office, a humble job, a life that looked like failure from the outside. But it hadn't been failure. It had been survival. It had been service. It had been a man taking his broken pieces and assembling them into something meaningful. Darius took a deep breath, the scent of old paper and cleaning supplies filling his lungs. He hoped he could do the same with his own broken pieces. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories. That summer before Princeton was strange. I always imagined it to be this huge celebration, you know, non-stop parties, road trips, just soaking up that last bit of pre-college freedom. But honestly, I just felt off, unsettled, like a fundamental part of me had shifted, and I couldn't get back to who I was before. I tried, believe me. I went to all the graduation parties. I hung out with Trevor and the rest of the lacrosse team. I went through the motions of being the same old Darius everyone knew and expected. But it all felt so hollow. The jokes didn't land right anymore. The casual meanness that I used to think was hilarious now just felt cruel. One night in July, we were at a party at someone's lake house. Trevor cornered me. Dude, what happened to you? He asked. You've been so weird since graduation, all contemplative and stuff. I just shrugged. I'm just thinking about things. He rolled his eyes. About the janitor thing? Come on, man. You apologized. You gave that whole speech. It's over. You can go back to normal now. And that's when it hit me. What if I don't want to go back to normal? Trevor just stared at me like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. What does that even mean? He asked. I took a deep breath. It means maybe normal wasn't that great. Maybe I was an asshole and I just didn't realize it because everyone around me was either too polite or too scared to call me out. You weren't an asshole, he insisted. You were funny. There's a difference. Is there? I shot back. Because I made someone cry, Trevor. Multiple times. I made a Vietnam veterana, Harvard graduate feel worthless. Because I thought it was entertaining. That's not funny. That's just cruel. Trevor got all uncomfortable. Okay, yeah. When you put it like that, it sounds bad. But you didn't know he was a veteran. You didn't know about Harvard. You were just messing around. Ignorance doesn't excuse cruelty, I said, feeling this strange new conviction. I should have been kind to him, regardless of his background. The fact that he had an impressive resume doesn't make him more deserving of respect than any other janitor. Every single person deserves basic human decency. He just shook his head. Jesus, You sound like a philosophy professor. Is this what Princeton does to people? I looked him dead in the eye. I'm not at Princeton yet. Dieses who's me figuring out that I don't like the person I've been. The conversation pretty much died after that. And I noticed Trevor started keeping his distance. So did some of the other guys from the team. Becca, my ex, completely stopped returning my texts. My whole social circle was shrinking. And yeah, it hurt. But it also felt necessary, like I was shedding an old skin that just didn't fit me anymore. Even my dad noticed the change. We were having dinner one night, and he said, "You been quiet lately? Everything okay?" "I'm fine, Dad, just thinking. About..." I looked over at him. "About what you said, about using power responsibly, about becoming someone worth being." My mom, Genevieve, who'd been pretty quiet about the whole graduation day drama, put down her wine glass. "Darling, I think it's wonderful that you're reflecting on your behavior, but don't overcorrect. You don't need to become some kind of saint. You're allowed to be young and imperfect." "I don't want to be a saint, Mom," I said. "I just don't want to be cruel." "You're not cruel," she insisted. "You're charming, confident. Those are good qualities." I couldn't believe it. "Mom, I made a 70-year-old man cry. For fun. That's not charming. That's sociopathic." She looked at my dad for backup, but he was actually nodding slowly. "He's right, Jen," Dad said. "What he did was wrong. The fact that he's taking it seriously shows maturity." But he apologized. "He gave that lovely speech." "Isn't that enough?" My mom pushed back. "Apologies are a start," my dad replied, his voice firm. "But real change requires sustained effort. If Darius wants to be better, he needs to prove it through his actions over time, not just with words at a graduation ceremony." Hearing my dad say that, it meant more than I can explain. My father, Sterling Kingsley, is not a man who gets into deep emotional or philosophical discussions. But my speech had clearly gotten to him, too. It had shifted something in how he saw his own life. "The scholarship fund is moving forward," he announced. "The Ezra Callaway Veterans Scholarship. First recipients will be announced in September. 10 veterans, full tuition, living expenses, and career counseling." I was stunned. "That's incredible, Dad." He looked at me, and I saw something new in his eyes. "It's the right thing to do. Should have done it years ago." He paused. "I've been thinking about what you said, about privilege and power, about how I've treated people. I don't like what I saw when I looked in that mirror." "So what are you going to do about it?" I asked, leaning forward. "Change," he said simply. "Same as you. Start noticing people. Learn their names. Show appreciation for their work. Small things that should have been automatic, but weren't." I felt this huge wave of, I don't know, pride, hope. It was just a massive relief that my dad was taking this as seriously as I was. Then I turned to my mom. "What about you, Mom? Are you going to change anything?" She looked so uncomfortable. "I don't think I need to change, darling. I've always been kind to service workers." "Have you?" I asked gently. "Do you know the name of the woman who cleans our house? Or the guy who maintains the pool? Or the valet who parks your car at the country club?" Her silence was the only answer I needed. Knowing their names would be a start, I said. Treating them like people instead of conveniences. Asking about their lives. Small things, like Dad said. She finally sighed. I'll try. But darling, don't become so focused on other people's hardships that you forget to enjoy your own success. You've earned Princeton. You've earned a celebration." "I know," I told her, "but I want my success to mean something more than just personal achievement. I want it to make the world a little better, not just make me a little richer." My parents just exchanged this look, a mix of confusion and maybe just a little bit of pride. Then, in August, just 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for Princeton, I did something completely impulsive. I looked up Mr. Calloway's address from a school staff directory and just drove to his house. It was a small, modest home in a working-class neighborhood. So different from the mansion I grew up in. I sat in my car for a minute, my hand hovering over the door handle. I almost drove away. But I'd come this far. I knocked. Mr. Calloway himself answered, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He looked different without his janitor's uniform. Smaller, maybe, but also more relaxed. Retirement clearly suited him. "Darius," he said, totally surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you," I said, my voice a little shaky. "To talk, if that's okay." "Of course. Come in." His house was incredible. It was filled with books. Every wall was lined with them. They were stacked on every surface, forming these tall towers in the corners. It looked like a used bookstore had just exploded inside. "I'm reorganizing my library," he explained with a smile. 40 years of collecting, never properly categorized. Retirement project number 1. "It's impressive," I said, and I meant it. "It's chaotic," he laughed, "but it's mine." He offered me a seat in a worn-out armchair and went to get some water. I used the moment to look around. I saw family photos on the mantel as kids, weddings, graduations, and there on the wall, almost hidden behind a bookshelf, was his framed Harvard diploma. Next to it, in a simple shadow box, were his military medals. This was his real life, the life that existed beyond the school hallways. He came back with the water. "So, what brings you here?" "I'm leaving for Princeton in 2 weeks," I started. "I wanted to see you before I left." "To thank you?" He looked puzzled. "For what?" "For being honest with me," I said. "For not just accepting my apology. For telling me that words aren't enough. That I needed to prove I'd changed through my actions." He looked at me intently. "And have you been proving it through action?" "I'm trying," I admitted. "It's harder than I expected. Some of my old friends don't really like the new me. They think I've gotten too serious, too preachy." He just nodded, like he understood. And in that moment, sitting in his book-filled living room, I knew that losing those friends, while painful, was part of the process. I was on the right path. It wasn't about being perfect or becoming a saint. It was just about trying, every single day, to be a little bit better than the person I was yesterday. And that, I was realizing, was a journey worth taking. Change often costs us. Relationships, people who benefited from our worst behavior don't always appreciate our growth. I remember Darius asking me once if that SYI wasn't still friends with people from Harvard. He'd been thinking about my story. He couldn't stop thinking about it, he said. A Harvard graduate working as a janitor. He called it tragic, but it's not. Tradi. It's just life. Things happen. We adapt. We find new purposes. I lost touch with most people from before the war. They didn't understand what I'd been through. Couldn't relate to my struggles. The distance just grew until we were strangers who'd once been friends. Then he asked me the big question. "Do you regret it?" "Vietnam." I told him the truth. Every single day. But I also recognize that it made me who I am. The good and the bad. I'm more empathetic because of my trauma, more patient, more aware of how fragile life is. Would I trade that awareness to get my academic career back? I don't know. Probably. But I don't get that choice. We just sat there for a moment. Then Darius said he brought me something. He pulled an envelope from his backpack. Inside was a check for $5,000. I told him I couldn't accept it, but he insisted. He said it wasn't charity. It was payment for services rendered. He said I'd mentored him without being asked, taught him a crucial lesson about empathy and kindness. He believed teachers deserved to be paid. He called it tuition for the education I provided. I told him it was too much, but he just shook his head. "It's not nearly enough," he said, "but it's what I can afford." He explained that his dad matches any charitable donations he makes, so it was actually $10,000 going to wherever I wanted. A veterans organization, a literacy program, or just my retirement fund. My choice. I just stared at the check, my eyes glistening. He didn't have to do that. He knew, but he wanted to. Actions matter more than words, right? He said. This is me trying to act better. I thanked him, and I could barely get the words out. It was incredibly generous. Then, out of the blue, he asked me to tell him about Vietnam. He knew it was painful, but he wanted to understand. He wanted to know what I survived. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said, "Okay, but fair warning's not a story with a happy ending." I just nodded. "I know." So, for the next 2 hours, I talked about being drafted at 23, right after finishing my bachelor's degree, about basic training, how it was designed to break you down and rebuild you as a soldier, about arriving in Vietnam and realizing nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for the reality of war. I talked about the heat, the jungle, the constant, knowing fear, about watching my friends die, about the moral ambiguity of a war where you couldn't tell the enemy from a civilian. I talked about the things I had to do to survive things. I still have nightmares about 50 years later. I told him bluntly, I killed people. Enemy soldiers. Maybe civilians. It was hard to tell in the chaos. I did things I'm not proud of, things I justified at the time as necessary. And Ivy spent 50 years trying to reconcile the person I was in Vietnam with the person I wanted to be. "How do you reconcile it?" he asked. And I told him, "You don't. Not fully. You just learn to carry it. You acknowledge that you contain multitudes, the soldier who killed, and the teacher who nurtures, the traumatized veteran and the man who finds joy in books bought RAL. Both are me." Darius listened to every single word. This was the story I carried every day while mopping floors and changing light bulbs. This was the weight I'd borne while being mocked by privileged teenagers who knew nothing about sacrifice. When I finished, he just said, "I'm sorry." He was sorry for what happened to me, for what the war did to me, and for making it worse with his own cruelty. I told him he was ignorant, which is different from being malicious, though the impact is the same harm as harm, regardless of intent. "I'll do better," he promised, at Princeton and after. I told him that was good, and then we talked about his plans, what he was going to study, his hopes for college, his fears about fitting in. I assured him he'd do fine. He's smart, motivated, and he was finally developing a conscience. That's a powerful combination. He asked if we could stay in touch, if he could email me and let me know how things were going. I told him I'd like that very much. As he got ready to leave, he thanked me again for talking to him, for sharing my story, for not holding a grudge. And I told him something I learned the hard way in Vietnam. Life's too short for grudges. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed, so you better make peace with yesterday while you still can. We shook hands, and he walked to his car. He told me later that he felt lighter, like he'd unburdened himself of a weight he hadn't even known he was carrying. Driving home, he thought about my library, my medals, my quiet life of reading and remembering. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was a life of dignity. A life that mattered, even if most people never noticed. And that's what he decided he wanted to build. A life that mattered. Not just one with impressive credentials and wealth, but one with actual, positive impact. He didn't know what that would look like yet, but he had 4 years at Princeton to figure it out, and he had my example to guide him. A reminder that real success isn't about status or money. It's about how you treat people when no one important is watching. Thank you for listening to our story. If it resonated with you, please consider sharing it. You never know who might need to hear it. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that matter. Princeton was overwhelming in the best and worst ways. The campus was absolutely beautiful. Gothic architecture and perfectly manicured lawns, filled with students who all seemed impossibly accomplished. Darius's roommate, Chunwei, was a national science fair winner. His neighbor down the hall was a published poet. It felt like everyone had done something truly remarkable to earn their spot. Darius, on the other hand, had his lacrosse skills and his father's donations, and a graduation speech that had gone semi-viral, though he tried not to think about that part. The first few weeks were a blur of orientation events, placement exams, and the exhausting social navigation that comes with a new school. As expected, Darius joined the lacrosse team. He actually enjoyed the sport, and it felt like the path of least resistance. But he also did something completely different, something for himself. He joined a volunteer organization that worked with veterans. He explained it to his roommate, Chun Wei. It's called the Veterans Outreach Program. They help vets transition back to civilian life, access benefits, and navigate the whole VA system. I just figured I should do something meaningful with my free time. Chun Wei nodded. That's really cool. My grandfather's a Korean War vet. He struggled for years before he finally got the support he needed. Organizations like that, they make a real difference. Darius's first volunteer shift was awkward. He was paired with a veteran named Samuel Okoye, a 40-year-old man who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan. Now, he was trying to finish his bachelor's degree while working 2 jobs and raising 2 kids. As they sat in the quiet volunteer center, Samuel looked at him. So, you're new to this. What made you want to work with veterans? Darius chose his words carefully. I knew someone, a janitor at my high school. He was a Vietnam vet. He changed my perspective on a lot of things. Changed it how? Samuel asked, his gaze steady. He made me realize that the people we ignore or dismiss often have the most important stories. That service and sacrifice come in forms we don't always recognize. Samuel nodded, a hint of a smile on his face. Most college kids volunteer because it looks good on a resume. You seem like you actually mean it. I'm trying to, Darius admitted. I spent a lot of years not meaning much of anything. They worked together for the next 3 hours, slowly and meticulously filling out VA paperwork, trying to make sense of the Byzantine system of benefits and programs. It was tedious. Bureaucratic work. Exactly the kind of thing Darius would have found mind-numbingly boring just 6 months ago. But this time it was different. It mattered. Samuel needed this help. And Darius, for once, could provide it. At the end of the session, Samuel let out a long breath and looked at the completed forms. Thank you. Seriously. I've been trying to figure this out for months. You made it actually make sense. Happy to help, Darius said, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Same time next week, definitely. Darius left the volunteer center feeling purposeful. It felt like AD actually done something that mattered, something that existed beyond his own personal advancement. As he walked across the quad, his phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Calloway. It read, Dear Darius, I hope Princeton is treating you well. I've been thinking about our last conversation about your promise to do better. I wanted to share something that might help. When I came home from Vietnam, I was angry. Angry at the government for sending me to war. Angry at the protesters for blaming veterans instead of politicians. Angry at the world for being so indifferent to what I'd been through. That anger consumed me for years. What finally helped was redirecting it. Instead of being angry at the world, I started being angry at injustice. At systems that failed people. At bureaucracies that made suffering worse. And I channeled that anger into action helping other veterans navigate the VA. Volunteering at homeless shelters, quietly supporting students who needed guidance. You're at a privileged institution, surrounded by privileged people. It would be easy to coast, to focus on your studies and your social life and forget about the larger world. But I hope you won't. I hope you'll use your anger at your own past cruelty to fuel your compassion for others. That's how we turn our worst moments into our best lessons. Write back when you can. I'd love to hear about your classes and your experiences. With respect and hope, Ezra Darius read the email 3 times, letting the words sink in. Then he sat down and wrote back, telling Mr. Calloway everything about the volunteer work, about Samuel, about this unfamiliar feeling of trying to be someone different. This was the start of a regular correspondence. They exchanged emails every week or 2, sharing thoughts and experiences. Mr. Calloway became a mentor in a way Darius had never expected, offering advice on everything from academic choices to relationship navigation, to simply staying grounded in an environment designed to inflate egos. Meanwhile, the lacrosse team was its own challenge. The culture was a stark reminder of everything he'd left behind at his old high school. Casual cruelty, disguised as humor. Privilege treated as an entitlement, and people dismissed based on their circumstances rather than their character. During one practice, one of his teammates, a guy named Bradley Thornton, pointed at a student walking past the field. "Check out that guy's shoes. Goodwill special. Probably can't even afford tuition. How'd he get in here?" Darius felt a flash of heat. "Maybe he's smart," he said, his voice flat. "Maybe he earned it through merit instead of money." Bradley stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Dude, what's your problem?" "I'm just making an observation." "Your observation is based on classism," Darius shot back. "You're judging someone's worth based on their shoes. That's shallow and unkind." "Jesus, Kingsley, when did you become such a social justice warrior?" "I'm not a social justice warrior. I'm just trying not to be an asshole." The conversation ended there, but the air on the team shifted. Some of the guys started keeping their distance. Others watched him warily, as if he might report their casual cruelty to the administration. A few days later, Coach Brennan pulled him aside after practice. "Kingsley, I've been hearing things," the coach said, his arms crossed, "that you're causing some tension on the team." Darius met his gaze. "Because I called out someone for being classist." The coach sighed, but didn't answer. Darius knew this was just the beginning. Changing himself was one thing, but changing the world around him, even just a small corner of it, was going to be a much harder fight. Still, as he walked away from the field, he thought of Samuel and Mr. Calloway. He wasn't just fighting against something anymore. He was fighting asterisk for asterisk something, and that made all the difference. "Because you're disrupting team cohesion," the coach said, his voice firm. "Lacrosse requires trust and camaraderie. If you're making the other guys uncomfortable," I cut him off, trying to keep my tone respectful. "Coach, with all due respect, if calling out cruelty makes people uncomfortable, then that's their problem, not mine. I'm here to play lacrosse and be a decent person. I can do both." Coach Brennan just studied me for a long moment. Then he said, "You know, I read about your graduation speech, the one that went viral, about the janitor." I nodded, a little surprised. "Yeah, that took guts," he admitted, "admitting you were wrong in front of everyone. Most kids your age would rather die than admit fault." "I'm trying to be better than I was," I told him, meaning it. "Good. Keep trying," he said, his expression softening just a bit. "But maybe dial back the righteousness a bit. You can stand up for what's right without alienating everyone around you." And you know what? It was fair advice. It really stuck with me. I started to realize that being principled was different from being preachy. You could totally advocate for kindness without being insufferable about it. It was a fine line to walk, but I was learning. By the time winter break rolled around, I felt like I'd finally found my rhythm at Princeton. The classes were tough, but I was managing. The volunteer work I'd started was incredibly fulfilling. And the lacrosse team, they'd sort of accepted me as the weird guy with the conscience, which honestly felt a whole lot better than being the cruel guy with the cheap jokes. I went home for Christmas, and I was shocked to find that my father had actually made good on his promise to change. Sterling Kingsley, my father, had learned the names of every single person on our household staff. He had started asking about their families, their lives. He'd even given out generous Christmas bonuses, along with handwritten thank you notes. I couldn't believe it. It feels strange. He admitted to me over a Christmas dinner. Being thoughtful requires an effort I'm not used to expending. I looked at him, really looked at him, and asked, "But it's worth it, right?" He nodded slowly. "Surprisingly, yes. The people who work for us seem happier, more engaged. Turns out being treated like actual human beings makes people perform better. Who knew?" My mother, who was sitting across from us, chimed in with her usual dry wit. Everyone who wasn't raised in extreme privilege knew. Dear, she'd been making her own changes too. They were slower, a bit more reluctant. But it was still progress. But I'm glad we're finally catching up. On Christmas Eve, something really special happened. Mr. Calloway, the janitor from my high school, invited me to dinner. He'd said, "Just you, me, and my daughter's family, and I accepted without a second thought. His daughter's name was Ruth. She was a high school English teacher in her early 40s, married with 3 kids. She greeted me with such a warm smile at the door. "Dad talks about you all the time," she said as she led me inside. "About your correspondence. About how you've changed. It means a lot to him, that you took his lesson so seriously." Dinner was amazing. It was warm and chaotic in the best possible way. Kids were asking a million questions. Multiple conversations were all happening at once, and laughter just echoed through their small dining room. It was nothing like the formal, stiff dinners I was used to at home, with the proper place settings and rigid conversation. This was so much better. It was messier, but it was so much more genuine. After dinner, while the family was cleaning up, Mr. Calloway and I sat out on his back porch. "Thank you so much for inviting me," I said, my breath fogging in the cold air. "This was really nice." "Family is important," he replied, his gaze fixed on his snow-dusted backyard, especially during the holidays. He paused for a moment, then looked at me. "You know what I'm most grateful for this year?" "What's that?" I asked. "You," he said simply. "That speech you gave at graduation. It inspired me to finally write about Vietnam. I've been working on my memoir. It's rough. It needs a lot of editing, but it's coming together, and I wouldn't have started if you hadn't reminded me that my story matters." "Your story definitely matters," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "So does yours," he insisted. "The story of a privileged kid who learned empathy, who chose to change even when change was uncomfortable and hard. That's a story worth telling too." I shook my head slightly. "I don't know if I've changed enough to be inspiring yet. Change is a process, Darius, not a destination. You're further along than you were 6 months ago. That's what counts." We sat there in a comfortable silence, just watching the snow fall gently in the gathering darkness. It was peaceful. "Breaking the silence," I said. "I've been thinking about my future, about what I want to do after I graduate from Princeton. And I think I want to work in policy, Veterans Affairs, specifically. I want to help reform the systems that failed you and so many others." "That's ambitious," he said, his voice filled with a mix of surprise and pride. "It's necessary," I replied, feeling a surge of conviction. "The VA is broken. The benefits are nearly impossible to access. Veterans are falling through the cracks everywhere. Someone needs to fix it." He looked at me, a thoughtful expression on his face. "And you think that someone is you?" "I think I have advantages," I said, laying it all out. "My education, the connections I can make, my family's resources. I should use all of that for something beyond just personal enrichment. So why not this?" A slow smile spread across Mr. Calloway's face. "Why not indeed? The world needs more people who use their privilege to lift others up. I think you might actually do it." "I'm going to try," I promised. "That's all I can promise." "That's all anyone can promise," he said, his eyes twinkling. He put a hand on my shoulder. "But Darius, don't lose yourself in the work. Don't become so focused on fixing the systems that you forget about the individual humans. Policy matters, but so do people. Remember that?" I nodded, taking his words to heart. "I will." That conversation changed everything for me. It solidified my path. It wasn't just about atoning for my past anymore. It was about building a better future, not just for myself, but for people who had been forgotten and left behind. The rest of my time at Princeton was a blur of hard work. I double majored in public policy and sociology. I spent my summers interning at veterans advocacy groups in D.C., learning the ins and outs of the bureaucratic maze veterans had to navigate. I kept in close contact with Mr. Calloway, who became my mentor and my friend. His memoir was eventually published to critical acclaim, and I was prouder of him than I could ever say. My own family continued their slow but steady transformation. My father started a foundation to provide scholarships for the children of his employees. My mother began volunteering at a local women's shelter. We weren't a perfect family, not by a long shot. But we were trying. We were learning to use our immense privilege for good. And me. I graduated from Princeton, just as I had planned. But instead of going to Wall Street or into corporate law like everyone expected, I took a low-paying job with a nonprofit dedicated to reforming the VA. It's hard work. It's frustrating. Some days, it feels like I'm hitting my head against a brick wall. But then I remember that conversation on Mr. Calloway's porch. I remember his advice. Policy matters, but so do people. And I remember the look on a veteran's face when we finally get their benefits approved, or find them stable housing. Change is a process, not a destination. I'm still on that journey. I'm still trying to be better than I was. And every single day, I'm grateful for the janitor who taught me that. The next 3 years at Princeton were a whirlwind of growth and challenge. Darius dove headfirst into his studies, focusing on political science and veterans policy. Every summer, he interned at the VA, witnessing the bureaucratic nightmares that veterans had to endure. His senior thesis was a deep dive into reforming disability benefit systems, a topic he was deeply passionate about. Throughout it all, he kept in touch with Mr. Calloway. What started as weekly emails soon turned into monthly phone calls. The old man became more than just a friend. He was a mentor, a sounding board, a constant reminder of why this work mattered so much. During his junior year, a special email from Mr. Calloway arrived. My memoir, it read, "It's finished. Would you read it and tell me if it's any good?" Darius was honored. He printed it out and read it in a single, captivated sitting. The story was raw, honest, and painful. It was a Vietnam veteran's journey from the hallowed halls of Harvard to the brutal realities of jungle combat, and then to a life of quiet dignity as a janitor. The writing was simply beautiful, a crystalline prose that perfectly captured both horror and hope. "This needs to be published," Darius declared on their next call. "People absolutely need to read this." Mr. Calloway was hesitant. "I don't know any publishers." Darius, "I'm a 73-year-old retired janitor. Who's going to care about my story?" "Everyone," Darius insisted. "Trust me. Let me help you find an agent." Darius reached out to his father, Sterling, who, through his vast business network, knew people in the publishing world. He pulled some strings, and the manuscript landed in the right hands. Just 3 months later, the calc on Mr. Calloway. "Had a book deal with a major publisher. I can't believe this is happening." The old man's voice crackled with emotion over the phone. "At my age, getting my first book published. It feels surreal." Darius smiled. "You were always a writer, Mr. Calloway. The world just took a while to notice." "Thanks to you," Mr. Calloway said. "You made this possible. You made this possible by surviving and writing your truth." Darius corrected him. "I just helped with the logistics." The book was titled Invisible, A Janitor's Journey from Harvard to Vietnam and Back, and it came out during Darius's senior year. The response was incredible. It received glowing reviews, got featured in major newspapers, and ignited important conversations about veterans' issues and the class assumptions we all make. Mr. Calloway even went on a small book tour. Darius made sure to attend the reading at Princeton. He watched as the old man stood before a packed auditorium of students and faculty, reading passages about war, trauma, and finding purpose in the most unexpected places. The room was silent, hanging on his every word. During the Q&A session, a student asked, "What would you say to young people who are trying to figure out who they want to be?" Mr. Calloway paused for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the young faces. "I'd say, pay attention to how you treat people who can do nothing for you. That's who you really are. Not your test scores or your job title or your bank account. Who you are when no one important is watching, that's your true character. Build that deliberately. Protect it fiercely, because everything else can be taken from you. But your character is yours to keep." Hearing those words, Darius felt that familiar tightness in his chest, a poignant reminder of the person he used to be, the people he'd hurt, and the man he was now striving to become. After the reading, Darius, his father, and Mr. Calloway went out to dinner. Sterling had read the book and was profoundly moved. "Your story needs to reach more people," Sterling told Mr. Calloway. "Have you thought about establishing a foundation, using the book's success to fund programs for veterans?" Mr. Calloway looked intrigued. "I hadn't, but I'm listening." The rest of dinner was spent brainstorming. Sterling offered to provide the seed funding to get it started. Darius volunteered to help with the organizational structure, using what he'd learned in his studies, and Mr. Calloway agreed to be the public face, using his powerful story to raise awareness and funds. 6 months later, the Invisible Veterans Foundation was born. Its mission was clear: to help veterans access education, navigate the tangled web of bureaucracy, and find purpose after their service, the very support Mr. Calloway wished had existed when he came home from Vietnam. Darius graduated from Princeton with honors. He had a job offer, not from a flashy consulting firm, but from a non-profit think tank focused on veterans policy. The salary was modest, the office was small, and the work wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. His father was incredibly proud. His mother was a bit concerned. "Darling," she'd said, "you could be making 6 figures." But Darius knew, deep down, that he was on the right path. The day before he left Princeton for good, he walked over to the custodial office. He found the head custodian, a woman named Lupita Hernandez, and simply thanked her for her team's hard work in maintaining the building he'd lived in for 4 years. She looked up, surprised. "Most students don't notice us," she said. "I know," Darius replied. "I used to be one of them, but someone taught me to pay attention, to say people, to recognize that invisible work is often the most important work." She smiled warmly. "Who taught you that?" Darius thought of his friend, his mentor, a janitor, he said, who turned out to be a hero. Lupita smiled at me. "We're all heroes in someone's story. Nice of you to notice." Her words stuck with me, a simple truth that resonated deeply as I packed my bags and moved to Washington, D.C. I started my new job, and just as Lupita had described, the work was exactly as advertised. It was a world of tedious policy analysis and seemingly endless bureaucracy. The victories were small, incremental, and often took months to achieve. It was a grind, a slow, methodical chipping away at a mountain of systemic issues. But slowly, I started to see the impact. Reports I poured my heart into began to influence actual legislation. Recommendations I made, buried in dense documents, led to improvements in programs for veterans. Men and women I would never meet, whose faces I would never see, were benefiting from work I'd never be officially credited for. It was an invisible impact. It reminded me so much of Mr. Calloway and his 48 years of quiet, dedicated custodial work. He was a master of invisible impact, and I was finally starting to understand the profound power in that. 2 years flew by in a blur of policy briefs and late-night research sessions. Then, my phone rang. It was Ruth, Mr. Calloway's daughter. "It's Dad," she said, her voice tight, strained with emotion that traveled right through the phone line. "He had a stroke. He's in the hospital." It doesn't look good. My heart sank. I didn't hesitate. I dropped everything, packed a small bag, and caught the next train back to my hometown. The journey felt like an eternity, my mind racing with worry. I rushed straight to the hospital from the station, the sterile smell hitting me. The moment I walked through the automatic doors, I found Ruth and her family in the waiting room, a somber group huddled together, their faces etched with the exhaustion of people keeping a long, painful vigil. "He's stable," Ruth told me, her voice a low whisper. "But the doctors, they say he won't fully recover." The stroke affected his speech, his mobility. "He's going to need long-term care." A wave of sadness washed over me. I took a deep breath. "Can I see him?" I asked. Ruth managed a small, tired smile. "He'd like that." I walked into his room, and the sight of him just broke my heart. Mr. Calloway looked so small in that big hospital bed, diminished and frail, surrounded by a web of tubes and blinking monitors. But then our eyes met, and his were just as sharp and alert as ever. He recognized me immediately. I pulled a chair close to his bed and sat down. "Hey," I said softly, trying to inject a bit of lightness into the heavy air. "I hear you're trying to get out of your book tour's obligations. Seems like a pretty extreme way to cancel appearances." A flicker of movement crossed the old man's face, a ghost of his familiar, warm smile. His speech was slurred, the words fighting to come out, but I could understand him. "He's still got it," he managed. "Sense of humor," Primera smiled back. "Learn from the best," I said. We sat there in comfortable silence for a while. Then I started talking, telling him all about my work in D.C., about the Foundation's latest initiatives, about the veterans we were helping, carrying on the mission he started. He listened intently, occasionally nodding, his mind clearly sharp and engaged despite his body's betrayal. After a long pause, I looked at me, his eyes filled with a vulnerability I had never seen before. "I'm scared," he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Not of dying. I've made my peace with that. I'm scared of losing myself, of becoming invisible again." His words hit me hard. This man, this giant who had shown me the meaning of a visible life, was afraid of fading away. "You are not invisible," I said, leaning closer, my voice firm. "You never were. And even if you can't write or speak or move the way you used to, you still matter. Your story matters. The lives you've touched, the people you've changed. That doesn't just disappear because your body's failing you." It held my gaze, searching my face. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything," I replied without a second's thought. "Keep fighting," he urged, a new strength in his slurred words. "For the veterans. For all the invisible people. For everyone the system ignores. Don't let my work die with me." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I held them back. "It won't," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise. The Foundation will continue. The policy work will continue. Your legacy is secure." He shook his head slightly. "Not my legacy," he corrected. "Our work. You're part of this now, just as much as me." I stayed for 3 days. Those days were a whirlwind of activity, a strange mix of profound sadness and practical necessity. I helped Ruth navigate the confusing maze of medical bureaucracy, a system I now understood all too well. I coordinated with the Foundation's board of directors, making sure everything was in order, assuring them that Mr. Calloway's vision would continue, no matter what. On the 3rd day, his condition worsened. The family gathered, a living testament to his legacy. Ruth and her siblings, his grandchildren, even great-grandchildren I'd never met. They took turns sitting with him, holding his hand, sharing memories, saying their quiet, heartbreaking goodbyes. The room was filled with love, a powerful, palpable force against the sterile backdrop of the hospital. Late that night, when the hospital corridors were quiet and most of the family had gone home to get some much-needed rest, I sat with him again. The only sounds were the soft beeping of the machines and our own gentle breathing. He was weak, but his mind was still there. He turned his head slightly on the pillow and looked at me. "Thank you," he whispered, the words barely audible. "For changing, for listening, for becoming someone worth knowing." I had to lean in close to hear him, and his words were like a final, precious gift. "No," I whispered back, my own voice choked. "Thank you. Thank you for seeing potential in me when I deserved nothing but contempt. For giving me a chance to be better." A faint smile touched his lips one last time. "We all deserve chances," he said, his voice fading. "Some of us just need more than others." Those were the last words he ever spoke to me. Mr. Calloway passed away early the next morning, surrounded by his family. He was 75 years old, and finally, after a life of fighting for others, he was at peace. His story didn't end there, though. It lives on, in the work we continue, in the lives he touched, and in the lesson he taught me. That no one is truly invisible. Thank you for listening. Please remember to take care of one another. The funeral was held in the same church Mr. Calloway had attended for 40 years. It was a small sanctuary, but it was completely packed. There was family, friends, veterans from his support groups, and students he had quietly mentored over the decades. Even readers who had been moved by his book were there. His wife, Ruth, asked me to speak. "He'd want you to," she said. "You were important to him, especially." These last few years, as I stood at the podium, I looked out at all the faces. They were Mr. Calloway's true legacial, the people he had touched through his quiet service and unexpected wisdom. I first met Ezra Calloway when I was a privileged, arrogant 17-year-old. I began. I was someone who thought a person's worth was measured by their status and salary. He was the janitor at my school. I mocked him. I made him the subject of cruel jokes. I treated him like he was invisible, like he didn't matter. The church fell silent. What I did, and know what I couldn't have known, because I never bothered to ask, was that this invisible man was a Harvard graduate, a decorated Vietnam veteran, someone who de-sacrificed his dreams to serve his country and then spent decades serving students who never appreciated that sacrifice. I had to pause for a moment to collect myself. On my graduation day, I learned the truth. I learned who Mr. Calloway really was, and I was horrified by my own cruelty. Ashamed of who I'd been, terrified that I'd hurt someone I could never make it right with. But Mr. Calloway did something remarkable. Forgave me. It wasn't easy. He made me work for it. Made me prove I was serious about changing. But he believed in second chances. He believed that people could grow, could become better versions of themselves. I looked over at Ruth, who was crying softly. He spent the last 5 years mentoring me, teaching me about empathy, about service, about using privilege responsibly. Every decision I've made, my college major, my career choice, my values, has been shaped by his example, by the man who showed me that invisible work is often the most important work, that quiet service matters more than loud success. I pulled out a worn piece of paper from my pocket. It was the email Mr. Calloway had sent me when I was at Princeton, about redirecting anger into action. Mr. Calloway wrote to me once, "Use your anger at your own past cruelty to fuel your compassion for others." That's how we turn our worst moments into our best lessons. He lived that philosophy. He took the anger and trauma of Vietnam, the disappointment of a derailed career, the pain of being dismissed and ignored, and transformed it all into purpose, into service, into a life that mattered deeply, even if most people never noticed. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. The last time I saw him, he made me promise to keep fighting, to continue the work, to advocate for invisible people, for veterans, for everyone the system ignores. I intend to keep that promise, not because it'll make me rich or famous, it won't, but because Mr. Calloway taught me that the best life is one spent lifting others up, that true success isn't about personal achievement, but about positive impact. I looked around the church again, at all the lives he had touched. So here is what I want everyone to take from this. The person you walk past without seeing might be carrying a story you cannot imagine. The janitor, the cashier, the security guard, the person serving your coffee, they all have depths. You'll never discover if you do unbother to ask. They all matter, even if society treats them as invisible. Mr. Calloway spent 48 years being ignored, and in those 48 years, he touched more lives, created more positive change, and demonstrated more wisdom than most people who chase recognition their entire lives. That's not failure. That's heroism. Quiet, uncelebrated heroism. But heroism, nonetheless. My voice grew stronger. I was 17 when I mocked a man I thought was a nobody. I'm 25 now, and I know better. There are no nobodies. There are only people we haven't bothered to see. People whose stories we haven't bothered to learn. People whose humanity we've failed to recognize. Ezra Calloway's life was a masterclass in human dignity, in choosing kindness when bitterness would be justified, in finding purpose when dreams are destroyed, in believing that service, any service, no matter how humble. I stepped back from the podium. I'll miss him. The world will miss him, even though most of the world never knew his name. But those of us who are lucky enough to know him, to learn from him, we carry his legacy forward. We see the invisible. We honor the servants. We recognize that true greatness has nothing to do with status and everything to do with character. I sat down, and Ruth squeezed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "That was perfect." After the funeral, we all went to a reception at Ruth's house. People shared stories about Mr. Calloway's students he'd helped, veterans he'd supported, readers whose lives were changed by his book. As I was listening, a woman approached me. "You're the one he wrote about in the last chapter," she said. "The student who changed." I was confused. He wrote about me. Yes, she said. The final chapter of his memoir is about forgiveness and second chances, about how one graduation speech showed him that people can grow beyond their worst moments. He didn't use your name, but he clearly cared about you deeply. I hadn't read the final chapter. The book was published while I was busy with grad school applications, and I'd only skimmed it. That night, alone in my hotel room, I pulled up the e-book and went straight to the end. The last chapter was titled Second Chances. Mr. Calloway wrote about a student who'd mocked him, hurt him, and made him question his own worth. But he also wrote about how that same student eventually apologized, changed, and became someone committed to serving others. I read the final lines. I spent years feeling invisible, he wrote, and then one young man decided to see me. To really see me, not just my job or my appearance, but my story, my humanity, my worth. That act of recognition changed both of us. He became better. I became hopeful again. We can't always control how others treat us, but we can control how we respond. We can choose forgiveness over bitterness. We can choose to believe in growth over permanent judgment. We can choose to see potential in people who see none in themselves. His words resonated deep within me. He had not only forgiven me, but he had seen my redemption as a source of his own hope. His life was a testament to the power of seeing the good in others and in giving them the chance to become the best versions of themselves. That's a lesson I'll carry with me forever. Thanks for watching. In my youth, I was cruel, arrogant, privileged, and dismissive of anyone I deemed beneath me. That included Ezra Calloway, the janitor. At my high school, I saw him as just another fixture, someone to be ignored, or worse, mocked. I had no idea who he really was, the depth of character hidden behind his quiet work. It wasn't until I was much older that I stumbled upon a book he had written, a memoir of his life, and that's when my world tilted on its axis. Mr. Calloway wrote about his time in Vietnam, about coming home to a country that didn't appreciate his service. He wrote about his struggles with PTSD, about a derailed career, about systems that failed him at every turn. But instead of bitterness, he chose service. He became a janitor and spent 48 years quietly helping students. And then he wrote about me. He didn't use my name, but I knew. He wrote, I saw his potential beneath his cruelty. Saw someone who could become kind if given the chance, and I chose to give him that chance. Reading those words, I broke down. This man, whom I had treated with such disrespect, had seen something in me that I didn't even see in myself. He had offered grace when I deserved condemnation. He described it as the best decision he made in his retirement. He said, watching someone transform from cruel to compassionate, from dismissive to empathetic, from privileged to purposeful, that's a gift. A reminder that people can change, that second chances matter, that our worst moments don't have to define us. His words were a mirror, showing me the boy I had been and the man I was still trying to become. He even thanked me, the student who had changed. He thanked me for proving that growth was possible, for using my privilege to serve others, for becoming someone worth knowing. He said my transformation gave his invisible years meaning, showing him that his quiet service wasn't wasted, that someone was watching, learning, and would carry the lessons forward. I cried for the man I had lost, for the boy I had been, and for the incredible grace I had been given. His final message in the book was a call to action for everyone. Give people chances, he wrote. See beyond their surface. Recognize that humans are complicated, capable of both cruelty and compassion. We all contain multitudes. The question is which multitudes we choose to nurture. He chose hope. He chose forgiveness. He chose to believe that even the cruelest person could become kind. And he urged us to do the same. There, in that hotel room, with his book in my hands, I made a promise. I promised to live up to the belief Mr. Calloway had in me. I promised to be the person he saw the potential for. I would use my second chance to create third, fourth, infinite chances for others. Fast forward 5 years, I'm sitting in a Senate hearing room. I'm no longer that arrogant kid. I'm a policy advocate. I'm there to testify about veterans policy reform. The bill we're debating is one I helped draft. We created the Invisible Veterans Act, in honor of Mr. Cup. Its purpose is to streamline VA benefits, expand mental health services, and provide educational support for veterans transitioning to civilian life. It's everything he should have had. A senator looks at me and asks, Mr. Kingsley, you've dedicated your career to veterans issues, despite never serving in the military yourself. What drives that commitment? I took a moment, thinking of the janitor's closet, of the quiet wisdom, of the book that changed my life. I knew a man named Ezra Calloway. He was a Vietnam veteran who came home to a country that didn't appreciate his service. He struggled with PTSD, with systems that failed him, and instead of becoming bitter, he chose service. He became a janitor at a high school and spent nearly 50 years quietly helping students, including me. I had to be honest. I was cruel to him. I mocked him. I treated him as invisible. And when I finally learned who he really was, a Harvard graduate, a decorated veteran, a man of profound wisdom, I was deeply ashamed. He taught me that how we treat the so-called invisible people reveals our true character. He taught me that service matters more than status, and that second chances are gifts we should give freely. I looked directly at the senators. This bill is my way of honoring his legacy, of making sure other veterans don't fall through the cracks the way he did. It's about recognizing that the people we so often ignore, the janitors, the service workers, the struggling veterans, they matter just as much as senators and CEOs. The senator nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Thank you. That's a powerful motivation. 3 months later, the bill passed. I was there at the Rose Garden ceremony when the president signed it into law. Standing in the crowd, I thought about Mr. Calloway. I wished he could have been there to see it, but maybe, just maybe, he could. Maybe somewhere. The janitor with the Harvard degree was smiling, proud of the student who had finally learned to see, grateful that his invisible years had led to real, tangible change. My phone buzzed. It was a text from his daughter, Ruth. Dad would be so proud. Thank you for making his dream real. I typed back, my eyes blurring a little. He made me real. This is just me returning the favor. That night, I went home and pulled out my old high school yearbook. I flipped to the back, to the page filled with signatures from my classmates, and there, among all the teenage scrawls, was his, the only faculty member who had signed my book. His message was simple, yet it had become the compass for my entire life. Remember, everyone matters. Treat them accordingly. I followed that advice for years now. I built a career on it. I've tried to build a life on it, and I'll continue following it for the rest of my days. Because the janitor everyone ignored taught me the most important lesson of all. Invisible people are only invisible if we choose not to see them. I choose to see. Every single day. Every single person. It is the least I can do for the man who saw me truly. Saw me and believed I could be better. Thank you for listening.